Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to Bridging the Gap. This morning we have on our panel Dr. Darlene Maxey, Dr. George Paris, and attorney Maria Fernandez. Dr. Maxey has a PhD in mental health counseling, also with a private practice in Windsor. Attorney Fernandez is a licensed barrister with a private practice here in Windsor with a baccalaureate of law. She works in the capacity of immigrations and also family law. And we have with us also Dr. George Paris. He has a PhD in rehabilitation counseling with a cognitive and counseling psychology from Michigan State University. He's also a licensed counselor, certified rehabilitation counselor, nationally certified psychologist, and a senior disability analyst, and diplomat of the American Board of Disability Analysts. This morning we are filming Bridge the Gap, and we would like to get information out to the community that we think would be beneficial, both for adults and young people. And first, we have a question here for you, Dr. Maxey. What is your specific area of expertise?
As you said, Pastor Holmes, I work as a mental health counselor in private practice. I work mainly with children, ages 6 to 17, but I also have my practice includes adults and couples.
Dr. Maxey, what would be an essential tool that you as a counselor would instruct a client to incorporate to help resolve their conflicts, whether it be business conflicts, marital conflicts, just relational conflicts in general?
I don't know if there would be an actual tool that I would suggest. There's many resources available to a person. First of all, I would say that there are a lot of written resources that people could use. There are a lot of books available in a variety of subjects, and I often refer people to many books that I use to help people when they're not with me. Also, basically coming to counseling takes a lot of courage. And I think that when people decide to make that move, what they have to understand is that this is going to be a journey. That it's not, a lot of people believe that they want counseling, but once they get into the session and they're sitting before you, it becomes almost a frightening experience for them. And then they begin to question whether they've done the right thing. I believe that what people need to have is patience with themselves, patience with the process of counseling, and to realize that it's not something that you change overnight. It took a person many years to get to a place where they need that kind of intervention. So they really need to be patient with themselves and with the process of counseling in terms of making sure that they're starting at the beginning and finishing their treatment plan through to the end so that they can function in a more positive way.
So in other words, it's a step-by-step process.
It is, definitely.
Okay. Dr. Paris, I would like to direct this question to you. Is there a counseling need that you see as being more prevalent among youth and young adults?
Hello, good morning. Well, I mean, in terms of looking at what's in the community, I think with young people, a lot of young people today struggle with identity crisis, or issues, struggle with career goals, and in terms of what they should do in terms of employment. So I think from a young person perspective, one of the things that I've seen is this lack of understanding of who they are and where they should, in terms of where they should go. So I think that is what's lacking in our community. Too many of our young people are graduating from school, and a lot aren't graduating, and in a sense, they don't know where to go, what to do, who to turn to. And I think, in a sense, it's a disservice, in my view, from the system, the school system, where we're educating students, but we're not assisting them in understanding their career goals, in looking at those paths in terms of what should I do next when I graduate from school. So I think from that perspective, we really need to assist our young people in understanding who they are and understanding what their long-term goals should be, and what type of approach they should have. And I think that's really lacking.
Okay, and that was one of my areas of interest as well. Is the educational process functioning efficiently as it should function?
Well, I think the education process, from a school perspective, it's to graduate students with a diploma. And I think part of it, if you hear now all the time, there's an emphasis on sciences and math and English. And, and that's good. That's what school is about. School is about, preparing young people so that they can be able to deal with their future. However, knowing the sciences and knowing math and English isn't going to prepare you to know what you are capable of doing
Absolutely.
or what you need to do. So I think part of it is we also need to educate students about their career objectives. We need to educate them about their likes and dislikes so that at least they know how to apply the sciences, the English, the math to a career. So I think it's one thing to graduate from school with a diploma, but it's another thing to know what are going to be my long-term goals, what is my career option, and I think that's something that the school needs to put more emphasis on. We need more career counselors in the school. I think that's really lacking. We have a lot of teachers, which it should be, but I think we also need career counselors who students can go to and talk to them. What are my interests? And what are my likes? What are my dislikes? And how could I go about learning about a certain career? And I think that would be very beneficial to young people if they have that understanding of where they can go next after they graduate from school and what is it I'm capable of doing, but also not only capable, what is it that I like to do?
Absolutely.
And I think that's very important.
And I would like to put this question out there, and anyone can answer this one. And I'd just like to know if this is something that you would agree on in your expert opinions. Does not the schooling process also benefit the student in sharpening their social skills as well? So many times I believe that the educational system focuses on, and just like you said, Dr. Paris, I believe they focus so much on the curriculum, and it's almost like having a brand new car sitting in the driveway and not knowing how to drive. If you don't know how to utilize what you have acquired, does it do you any good? And so my question is, does not the educational system also help sharpen the social skills, or wouldn't that be something that should be incorporated into the curriculum?
What I've found in the school system is a lot of times it depends on what school you are in. There are some, first of all of the schools want to meet the provincial guidelines. Everybody wants to have those high scores. So that's one reason why they focus on the curriculum. But if you're in a depressed area, where there is like a transient group of people, for example, maybe in an area where there are projects, it's public housing, and there's more of a behavioral component, then it's sort of like they switch up. And it becomes all about the social skills, and then the curriculum is lost in a lot of ways. If you, and to me, there has to be a way to combine the two. Some schools are very lacking in being able to produce kids who can produce adults who can actually get out there and function not only socially, but in a career. And then other schools are producing kids who can go out there and, have this fantastic career, but don't know how to relate to people.
Right.
And if I can add, in terms of what Darlene said, I think that's important to understand. When you look at children, we're looking at the different avenues or places those children are coming from. Okay. And when we look at the graduation rate and we look at those kids who are successful, many times those kids who are successful are coming from homes that have successful parents. So when you talk about social skills, they're also getting those social skills from home. There's an expectation, not only from the educational aspect, but also there's an expectation in terms of how you are going to behave in society.
Right.
So I think those kids are good. And I think there are other kids who are coming from areas where they lack the social skills, where they don't have the parenting to provide them with that. And you know, unfortunately, you know, the schools are focusing on the curriculum. You know, as Darlene said, that's to meet the provincial standards. So many of these kids may not acquire the type of social skills that is necessary to further their education or to further themselves in society. So I think, again, it needs to be a balance in terms of who are we dealing with and what does this child present. And I think if we understand each child from where they're coming from and what they're presenting, then as a system, then we look at those children and said, yes, we need the curriculum, but also in order for these individuals to be successful, these are other areas we need to focus on to highlight those skills.
Okay. Okay. I would like to comment on that right after our break, and then we'll come back and we'll hear from Attorney Fernandez. We left off with an answer and comment from Dr. Paris, and I totally agree with you, Dr. Paris, because with my own children, I stress to them that when you walk out of the door, you not only represent yourself, but you represent this family. You represent our name. So I completely understand that the social skills and the sharpening of the social skills should start at home. I want to direct this question to Attorney Fernandez. With your family court expertise, have you seen a decline or increase or neither in the breakdown of the family?
Good morning. I can only speak to my particular practice, and I can honestly say during the 10 years that I've been practicing, it's been a steady flow of clients on a regular basis. So I can't say that I've noted either an increase or a decrease. What I have noticed, though, over the years is that there seems to be a cyclical nature in the types of cases that are coming in through the door. In terms of my family practice, I work both on cases where mom and dad are separating, as well as cases where children have been taken into the care of the Children's Aid Society, and there's a child protection matter before the court, and I'm defending parents. So what I've seen in my practice is, as it relates to the Children's Aid matters, there seems to be an increase in Children's Aid Society matters immediately after the beginning of the school year come September. As it relates to the families and the breakdowns in the families, there seems to be an increase immediately after the Christmas holidays. I'm sure there's a variety of factors that can be come into play. I'm sure the financial stress of the holidays may be an impact. I think that simply having the opportunity to spend time together for the husband and the wife, the mom and dad, and having those days within the holidays together. If you have a good relationship, then that's going to be a time that you're going to enjoy. If there's tension within the relationship, spending those 10 days or so together may become unbearable. And that may be the reason that the people are choosing to separate at that time. Being a family law lawyer, though, I very often refer clients into the community. If somebody comes into my office and they're telling me that they're contemplating a divorce, then the law requires the lawyers to say, look, let's take a step back here. Let's see if counseling is an option for you, and let's see who counselors in the community are that we can refer you to. And it's very often the case that I can see a husband or a wife in my office. They'll come in, they'll find out what their legal rights are, but they'll go back into the community and they'll come back in 6 months or so and say, look, I've tried, it hasn't worked. Now I need somebody who's going to represent me from a legal perspective, and then we go from there. And
that was going to be one of my questions. Is there a mediation offered prior to divorce? Is there counseling offered prior to divorce? And now you said, Attorney Fernandez, that your office actually refers them out, would refer a couple for counseling, and they would be able to gain the access and the information to acquire the counseling through your office?
Understand, Pastor Holmes, that when somebody comes in to see a lawyer, the law society frowns upon us meeting with husband and wife. So we'll either meet with the husband or the wife.
Okay.
And yes, one of the very first things that we ask is, are you serious? This is what you want to do. Let's consider alternatives. Let's get you to some counseling. And then we refer them to people in the community where they can seek that counseling.
Okay. And one other question for now. I heard you say that it seems to be a rise at a certain point in the year. Would you attribute that to maybe finances as well?
Pastor, I think it depends on the age bracket of the person that I'm seeing on the other side of my desk. I find in terms of younger couples, yes, finances are an issue, sometimes quite an important issue. I find also, and my friends touched upon this as they were speaking, lack of skills. It is probably even more important than the financial aspect. The lack of skills in terms of being able to communicate effectively with your partner, to being able to tell your partner, look, these are my needs, this is what we need to do, let's get together, let's plan through this. Let's face it, everybody has ups and downs within their life. And how you're going to deal with those ups and downs depends on the resources that you have available to you. The most powerful resource, of course, I would even say isn't money. The most powerful resource is the ability to communicate.
Right. And I've spoken with Dr. Maxey, and I would like to present this question to you. But from a Christian perspective, what are some of the benefits of counseling?
The ability to communicate, I think, is one of those. I mean, I think that is key. Not just communicating with your children, your partner, but from a Christian a Christian perspective, it's about being able to communicate with God. And a lot of people lose that ability. They don't. They've lost their way.
Right.
Sometimes in coming into counseling, and as a Christian counselor, from that perspective, we can reassess that and see where they are, and look at the things that look at their lifestyle, look at how they may have fallen away from their relationship. But it's important to examine how they're communicating with themselves, with their families, with their churches, with their God.
So, in other words, and I'd like to really understand this for the community, because I understand that if you worked for a corporation, and I can understand how, even though the CEO is just on the other side of the wall, he seems miles and miles away from where you are, and you're in the same building. So, in other words, what you mean by them losing their contact is they don't realize that help is just on the other side of the wall?
That help is that the Lord has never left them. I think that people lose that idea, and they begin to work for themselves. The CEO is on the other side of the wall. He seems inaccessible. Right. And yes, God seems inaccessible as well. And people don't realize that he's there. It's in putting that one foot in front of the other. You kind of get lost in that everyday struggle, and you forget to turn and get down on your knees. You just keep walking, and you don't fall down on your knees in prayer and talk to the Lord in the way that will get you answers. And again, as I mentioned before, patience with waiting to hear what he has to say and not moving forward until you know for sure.
Absolutely.
And that's a very, very difficult thing for me, for a lot of people to do.
Right.
You know.
Right. And we'll be right back after a short break. Dr. Paris, I would like to direct this question to you. We've been speaking about counseling and some of the issues that warrant counseling. Are there adequate facilities and funds available to accommodate the needs?
Well, I think, again, I don't work in Windsor per se. I teach at Wayne State University, and I have a practice in the States. But I've done things in Windsor before, and prior to to today, I think there have been much more facilities and programs that were available for youths, especially in the community. I know in the past I worked with St. Clair College, the Futures program, which was years ago, or even when you had the the Barbary scenario with the Jobs Ontario Youth Program to assist youths in trying to understand their careers and getting jobs. And I think a lot of those programs aren't available today, and I think that's lacking. So part of what I see is that there are people who need counseling and who are not being provided with those counseling. Unless you have funds or insurance to go and seek out private counseling, that is not going to be something that you're going to get mainly from a public facility. Unless you're diagnosed with a mental illness or something of that nature, you are not going to be able to get those counseling through a public means. So I think we need to have, I would even argue, more churches being involved in providing community counseling, using their halls on Saturdays and weekends and and weekdays to provide counseling for young people as well as programs for young people. So I think from my vantage point, from what I've seen and from what I've observed and from what I hear in the community, there needs to be much more. And I think probably Darlene could even say much more on that. But I think from my vantage point, there needs to be more emphasis in that area.
And through my research, that's one of the things that I found, that a lot of the funding for the programs has been cut. And that was going to be the next thing I wanted to find out. From your perspective, what are some of the things that we as a community can do to assist?
Well, I mean, let me add this before I get to that question. I think when we look at funds being cut, I think obviously it goes back to what a community sees as being important.
Right.
And, we place a lot of emphasis on education, rightly so. We place emphasis on the healthcare system, rightly so. But, I think one of the things that people need to understand is that even when you look at the healthcare system, if we don't place emphasis on counseling, we are not creating healthy people.
Right.
And I think, we talk about communication skills. Well, part of what a lot of young people is missing is that self-concept, that self-esteem. And when you have a generation of young people who lack self-esteem, lack self-concept, they're lost. And I think we need to focus on that because there's a correlation between, one's sense of self and being and feeling and healthcare outcomes. If you're depressed, if you're anxious, you're likely to have more physical disabilities. You're likely, to
Right.
have more illnesses. So I think we need to understand that, yes, we are cutting funds, but we also need to make sure we put funds into programs that can counsel young people.
Absolutely.
And that can create healthy young people. In terms of funding, I think, again, that is something we need to look at where those fundings, should come from. And I think I would argue that the Ontario government, the healthcare system, needs to put as much emphasis on funding into counseling for young people,
Absolutely.
as well as adults, as they put into the healthcare system, because I think the two are intertwined. As I said, to you before, if we have healthy minds, healthy people, we tend to have low incidence of physical illness from the medical perspective. So I think that's one of the things is lacking, and we should hopefully, as a community, try to get our government, try to get our people, our public people to understand that we need to have counseling as part of our community goals.
Absolutely. And one of the goals that I hope to reach from this show is we're teaching that we can do much more together than we can apart. One of the things that I found really disturbing through my research here was that in cutting funds, there were programs that were available to young people as well as the adults, and those programs had been brought together, and then at some point those programs had been split apart, but the funding stayed with one program. And that was one of the things that was really disturbing to me, because if you split the program with no funding, what type of program could that be? And that's what raised the question for me. What can we do as a community to assist? Because the way I see that is if the program is split with no funding, you're basically throwing people out that really need the help.
But you have to remember, too, that we've had a global crisis, and
Yes.
that's where a lot of the funding has fallen. That's why. And I think we want to look in terms of what do you mean by counseling? Because you have to understand that counseling in and of itself, a therapeutic kind of counseling, is very different than somebody offering a helping hand. There has been a recent act passed in Ontario that prohibits people who are not credentialed to call themselves counselors.
Correct.
Okay, so it's important that people make that distinction, that there's counseling that is in terms of a credentialed person, a person with training coming in to help, coming in to actually see a person through a crisis or see a person through bettering themselves in a way that is therapeutic. And then there's the idea of, pastors or church members or some other type of person
Yes.
coming in to help. I think that the two should be combined. And in terms of having the help of the government, I think it's up to those of us, people like me, for example, who are in private practice and because of this new act, to look for aid, look for those grants, look for those things that will bring us, that will help us to get out into the community.
Right.
Because I think one of the things that we were talking about is that private practice is sort of an elitist thing. I mean,
Right.
it's for people who can actually afford to come. But I think that where we can be helpful in our private practices is searching for those ways that we can reach out into the community. Things that we can offer that don't have them coming to pay session for session after session.
Right. And that was going to bring me to our next point because we have to move on for our next panel. But would each one of you elaborate on the cost that's attached to your practices, your individual practices, and how you can be accessed?
I think that what people have to understand when they're paying for a private practice counselor is that they're paying for the schooling. There's a lot of people, you can go into the phone book and find a myriad of psychologists and counselors and people who provide the service. And the fees range anywhere from $80 to, depending, because there's a lot of people who practice as a master in a master's level. So you can find the cost from $80 anywhere up to over $200 per session. My particular fee is $120 per session, which I try to make it attainable for most people. A lot of people do have access to funds through churches, and a lot of people do have private insurance that they use, but I try to keep my fee at a level where it is actually accessible to people.
And Dr. Maxey, how can you be accessed from someone who has need of your practice?
Well, I have two offices. One of them is in Mackenzie Hall in Windsor, and the other is in Leamington in the Princess Center.
Dr. Paris?
And unfortunately, I do not have a practice in Windsor, but I have a practice in Detroit, and most of my clients are referred by the state of Michigan. So there's not a fee that a client pays to come, to see me. It's funding through the state. I'm looking to start a practice in Windsor. I've been thinking about that for a while now, and I have another colleague and myself who are looking to start a practice in Windsor. So hopefully, I'm hoping by the summer that I should be up and running somewhere in Windsor. And once I get going, I will make sure that you get that information,
right,
and that the community is aware of where I am, so that we can pass that information on to people.
Okay. And Attorney Fernandez, in order for them to access you if they're in need of your services?
Well, if they're in need of our services, the best way to find us is probably through the phone book or through referrals. Seems to be the most majority of our clients come through other clients that have been in the office. As far as legal fees go, I think it's no secret to anyone. Legal fees are extremely expensive, and if you're looking at it, retaining a lawyer in the city, you're going to be paying anywhere from $180 to $400 an hour. Our fees hover about the mid-200 range. One of the things that makes litigation expensive, of course, is the amount of legal knowledge and schooling that goes into providing the service.
Absolutely.
But what we find in our practice is that because litigation is so expensive, that's one of the strongest motivational factors to get people to settle their claims and to settle them reasonably. We focus on getting our clients in the door and out the door as quickly as possible. And I think that it's important that the community know that the days of the old practice of law are sort of gone. Gone are the days where a litigant comes in through the door, finds himself in a courtroom trial immediately, and walks out completely bewildered saying, "What just happened? I was completely bamboozled." You spoke about mediation earlier, Pastor,
yes.
And I think that this is very important because do I have mediation counseling? Yes, I do. Do I have general counseling knowledge? Absolutely. I obtained that because my other life I was a registered nurse, and that was a very useful tool in dealing with patients. But what I find in the context of my practice is that the system now is created in such a manner that there's a process. You come into the office, you talk to the lawyer, you draft an application where you put down what happened to you, what's your story. That in and of itself is extremely cathartic. Your next step is that you go in front of either the master here in Windsor or a judge, and you have a case conference. What's the purpose of that case conference? The judge is presented with your story, with the other side's story, with the issues, and that's an opportunity to try and resolve as much as we can, with having a judge telling you, this is the law, this is the way it's going to go if you decide to pursue a trial. That's very powerful.
Right.
A lot of people need to hear, this is what my rights are, coming not only from their lawyer, but affirmed by a judge or the master.
Absolutely.
In order to reach an equitable resolution. 90% of our cases settle. They don't go to trial. Our goal is to get the best possible outcome for the person that we represent,
yes.
And we've been very effective in doing that over the last 10 years.
Good. Well, at this time, I would really like to thank each one of our panelists, Attorney Fernandez, Dr. Paris, and Dr. Maxey, for your time and your expertise. And we really appreciate it. We hope to see you again, and may your practices flourish.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And welcome back to Bridging the Gap. We have now on our panel Shantae Fortune and Tiffany Davis. They're here representing Young Adults Ministry. And I'd like to ask just a few questions concerning your peers and your generation. But I've had an interview with law enforcement, local police department, OPP, and one of the things that I was told is that usually the people that they engage are people who have just been hanging out with nothing to do. So my question is, if there were structured programs or activities available, do you think your peers would utilize them?
Of course they would. It also depends on where they're established at. A lot of the time it's because there's no transportation, or it's so far away that they can't get there, or it's a certain age limit and the younger ones want to do what the older ones want to do, or sometimes the older ones are like, well, we want to do something that the younger ones do. So it's kind of like the split up of the ages and things like that too. So you're saying that there are several
other variables involved, even if there were structured programs set up as far as transportation and location.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Tiffany, I'd like to direct this question to you. What would motivate young people to direct their energy into a positive direction versus the direction that law enforcement says that they see on a day-to-day basis with individuals that they come in contact with? What is it that would help direct that energy into something positive?
New things in the community. Seems like we have the same thing. There's nothing new that any of us know about that's happening. So if there's more and interesting things in the community, then the kids are going to go out to it, and the law enforcement, they won't be out, so they'd have nothing to look for.
So if there were new activities established in the communities, and that's sort of back to our first question, if there were structured activities or programs in the community, that's something that would help direct that energy into a positive direction. Shantae, are there motivating factors that influence the generation in a negative direction or a positive direction? For instance, do you think that drugs may have an impact in a negative way, and the breakdown of families? Do you think that those things have a negative impact? And are there any other things that you've observed in the community that would push the young people in a negative direction versus a positive direction?
Of course there is. Sometimes it's the household, your parents won't allow you, or they have a certain idea of what you should be doing or what you shouldn't be doing. Drugs, they're everywhere. It's really not like we can get away from violence. We can't really get away from, negative things because it's everywhere. But at the same time, if you change your peers, you have to be willing to change first yourself, and then you'll start changing who you hang with. You'll start changing what you do, and then from there, then you'll bring forth more positive things. Then you'll hang out with different places, with different people. Then you'll be able to find more things to do in a more positive manner. Relationships also, you have to be connected to someone who actually likes the same things you like, who, agree with the same things you agree with, have the same beliefs that you have. Otherwise, there's conflict there, and then that's just going to pull you to a more negative, venue. So,
well, and Tiffany, I'd like to ask you this then. If that's the case, how big of a problem is the peer pressure, if any at all?
I don't think there's much peer pressure. Well, maybe for the older kids, because, they have their own opinion of what they want to do. They might try it once, but, for me, peer pressure is not a big issue. I can say no, I have my own track. I have my own track mind. I grew up around, growing up in the right direction, so I don't think it's a big issue and problem nowadays.
So the peer pressure is not seen as a motivating factor to push the energy into a negative direction as much as the inactivity and the home situation. And I heard you say you were brought up in a more positive environment. So rather than the peer pressure, would you say that the environment from the upbringing and what they're taught in the home would have a more negative impact?
It could possibly go both ways, negative and positive. I believe more in the positive way, because I'm sure people are trying to change from what they grew up into something more positive to go the right way.
Okay. Shantae, would you like to weigh in on that?
It was asked of me, what is it that I believe? And whatever you believe is what you act upon each day. So if you believe that drugs is going to take away your problems, then you're going to use drugs. If you believe that praying and fasting and talking to your parents and things are going to help you get out of a situation, then that's what you're going to do. So that's it's a lot of personal influence that can override peer pressure. When you have self-control, that's that's what your main focus is. I don't have to do it because I don't want to do it, because I don't believe that this is what it takes to do what I'm doing.
Would you say that it would take more to stand up to be a leader than to be a follower?
I feel that it would take more to be a follower, because a leader, that's just what you want to do. If you have the support and the willingness, it's not hard at all.
And we want to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll hear from a couple of young men and get their perspective. Right back with Bridging the Gap. All right, we're back here at Bridging the Gap with a couple young men involved with Raise the Roof Ministries. We have here on the panel now DeAndre Fortune and Shane Scott. I'd like to direct this question to Shane. Do you feel powerless to help change the environment, or empowered?
I feel empowered. I feel that we can do a lot with our youth today. If we just make moves, we need some support from the adults.
That's right. So you think that with the support from our generation, working with you guys, that would give you the support you need to make some positive changes in the community?
Well, I think the adults are more negative towards the youth nowadays. I think all we do is rob and steal, get into trouble. There is a lot of positive in some young men out here. They just don't see it in us. So I guess we got to step up and prove that. Mm-hmm. I think the adults helping us and supporting us will help us expand in our ministry.
DeAndre, I'd like to direct this question to you. Do you see that parents are involved, or are they involved at all? Are they involved too little? Are they involved too much?
I don't think that parents are involved enough, because you hear about young men or young ladies out here stealing, robbing, doing drugs and all this, but at the end of the day, they're not trying to help them. They're just, beating it in their head. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. But they're not trying to take no initiatives and help them get out of that situation.
So do you think if there was more teaching and nurturing coming out of the home, that would have an impact on the decisions that young adults and youth are making?
Yeah, because some homes are, on the right track. But then there's some parents who really don't care what their kids do at the end of the day. On
funding, if there was an avenue to help fund some of your interests, would you take advantage of those? Say, for instance, if you had a venture that you would like to get involved in. I know a lot of young people have expressed to me that they have an entrepreneurial spirit, that they would like to create jobs, and they would like to be in a position to form and establish different activities. If there was an avenue to help you fund some of those ventures, is that something that you would be interested in taking advantage of?
I would use it towards young kids to help them up, because by the time you get around my age, they're already imprinted in what they're gonna do. They're mostly basically hard-headed. They don't want to listen. They want to take their own routes. If you can get to them young, maybe you can make a change before that.
Okay.
So I would use it towards that, towards young people.
And DeAndre, I'd like to direct this question to you. How do you feel? You've been through the educational process, and being involved with the ministry, you see other young people coming along behind you. How do you feel about the educational process? And do you feel that the educational process is making a positive enough impact in the lives of the young people going through that particular program right now?
I don't think it is, no, because if they don't want to learn it, they won't sit there and pay attention, And teachers said it when I was going to school. Teachers said it. They don't get paid enough to be trying to focus on one kid or two kids that's falling behind or slacking in their class. So if the teachers took initiative and trying to help more, then we have a better turnout.
So do you think that if there was some diversity training for the teachers, because I understand that every student doesn't learn at the same pace and every student doesn't learn in the same way. So what you're saying is if there was diversity training, not only training to teach them in their specific field, but diversity training to learn how to teach different individuals, that would be beneficial in the school system.
Exactly.
We would like to thank you, young men, and all of the young people who have been on the panel here with Bridging the Gap. Our goals for this show is to help change the perspective that one generation has towards another generation. Also, we would like to open lines of communication, and we would also like to learn how to find common ground in order that we can all work together, because with Bridging the Gap, I believe that we can do more together than we can apart. I thank you for your time. It has been a pleasure talking with you, young men, and we'll see you here again on Bridging the Gap.